As he walked with General Choi Hae-san, the Crown Prince asked again, "General, when firing this handheld cannon, does it really have to be operated by two people?" General Choi nodded. "Usually yes, Your Highness." The Crown Prince continued, "But I heard that one person can operate it alone." General Choi explained, in emergency situations, an artillery soldier can wedge the weapon under their right armpit, or hold it with their right hand while lighting the fuse with the left." Hearing that, Hyang let out a sigh. "That sounds troublesome." General Choi nodded in agreement. "It is. That's why we usually use two people. But that creates another problem. It requires more manpower, which makes it difficult to increase the number of artillery units." The Crown Prince nodded. "I see now. We need to focus on solving the handheld cannon issue first." Suddenly his thoughts drifted to the past, back when he was still Kim Jin-ho before reincarnating as Crown Prince Hyang. He had once worked in the US on a shipbuilding project. There, he met many military enthusiasts. One day, one of his friends invited him to see his private collection. Inside the room, Jin-ho saw all kinds of firearms from different eras, neatly arranged like a museum. His friend once said, "Jin-ho, let me show you how to make bullets." Jin-ho was stunned. His friend even knew how to make his own ammunition. Truly the land of guns, he thought at the time. Out of curiosity, he asked, "So, there's about 30 grams of gunpowder in these bullets, right?" But his friend immediately corrected him. "Not grams, grains. Remember that, Jin-ho." Back then, Jin-ho didn't even know how many grams were in one grain. He quickly looked it up on his phone and was shocked. So less than 2 grams of gunpowder could launch a 14-gram bullet at the speed of sound? Amazing. It was one of the most mind-blowing discoveries he had ever encountered. Back to the present, now as Crown Prince Hyang, he pondered. Black powder only had half the power of smokeless powder. But it should still be enough to generate an explosive force similar to a .50 caliber bullet, right? In this era, there were no aiming devices. Every shot relied purely on the naked eye. To guarantee enough force, the only solution was to increase the amount of gunpowder. But doing that would increase the recoil, and strong recoil could seriously injure, or even kill, an artillery soldier. For context, recoil, also known as kickback, is the backward force that occurs when a firearm is discharged. The Crown Prince sighed. This is a vicious cycle. He kept muttering to himself, "Should I create a sighting device? But how would I even do that in this era? Or should I just improve the handheld cannon first? If I do, might as well make it truly efficient. But can the artillery unit handle the recoil?" Suddenly, an idea sparked in his mind. His eyes lit up, and he threw open the door with excitement. "First, let's solve the small problems, then we'll tackle the big ones." Without wasting any time, he reported to his eunuch, "I'm heading to the Ministry of Military Affairs." The scene shifts to the Ministry of Military Affairs. General Choi Hae-sun was sitting in an odd position while reading a book. When the Crown Prince arrived, he couldn't help but think, is he reading while squatting? Startled, the general quickly stood up and saluted. "You're here, Your Highness." Then, bowing his head, he said, "My apologies, Your Highness. I'll tidy everything up right away." Hyang waved his hand. "No need, I just have a question." Clearing his throat, Hyang asked, "General, has the thickness of the cannon fuses been standardized?" General Choi replied, "Yes, Your Highness." The Crown Prince nodded. "May I take a look at one?" Without hesitation, General Choi fetched a fuse for him, but his curiosity got the better of him. "May I ask, why do you want to see the fuse, Your Highness?" Instead of answering, Hyang made another request. "Could you light this fuse for me?" Since the request was simple, General Choi lit the fuse without question, but within seconds the flame went out. The Crown Prince raised an eyebrow. "I'd like to see the other fuses as well." Right then, General Choi's expression stiffened. He realized something was wrong. As if confirming his suspicions, Hyang said, "Just as I thought." General Choi sighed. "The problem is, these fuses can't withstand the wind, right?" The Crown Prince nodded. "Exactly." He then asked, "Has no one ever reported this issue?" General Choi answered honestly, "No, Your Highness. But if the fuse gets blown out by the wind, the soldiers just relight it with another one." Hyang immediately countered, "But what if it happens in the middle of a battle, at a critical moment? Would they really have time to replace it? On the battlefield, time is life," the Crown Prince declared firmly. He quickly gave an order. "Send a directive to the Military Logistics Department. Have them determine the most suitable fuse length as soon as possible." General Choi was deeply impressed. His admiration for the Crown Prince only grew. How can someone his age think this far ahead? On a bright sunny day, the Minister of Finance happened to run into Yi Cheon on the street. It had been a while since they'd last seen each other, so they decided to walk together and chat. The minister asked, "I haven't seen the Crown Prince around lately. What has he been up to?" Yi Cheon replied, "The Crown Prince mentioned he's working on a very important experiment. He's been locked inside the research pavilion for the past 5 days, completely focused on his work. Just recently, he even requested mercury from the Military Logistics Department. What would he need mercury for?" The minister's eyes widened, clearly shocked by what he had just heard. Yi Cheon stared blankly for a moment before answering, "I don't know. but I believe it has something to do with why he summoned me today. I must be going. Good luck, Master Yi Cheon, said the Minister of Finance, concerned as he watched his friend walk away with a troubled expression. The scene shifts to the research pavilion. Crown Prince Hyang had summoned the ministers for a discussion. He opened the meeting casually. It's been a while since we last met. Without wasting time, he turned to the Minister of Public Works. How's the progress on modifying the calendar? The minister replied. We've made some progress, Your Highness. We've identified the differences between our calendar and the Ming dynasties, and we're currently working on the adjustments. Hyang looked slightly relieved. Good. So, when can we expect the final result? The minister answered. We estimate it will be ready by winter this year, Your Highness. However, the moment he heard the word winter, the Crown Prince's expression darkened. His face turned stern as he said, That's too long. He spoke firmly. The deadline is the Mid-Autumn Festival. No later than that. If necessary, bring in more officials. Official Yung Cho, clearly nervous, replied, No one's willing to come, Your Highness. Still wearing a serious expression, Hyang responded, I've told you before. Use my name to pressure them. The deadline is the Mid-Autumn Festival. No exceptions. The ministers bowed deeply and said, As you command. Yung Cho muttered in his heart, He must be a Dokaibi. This man is a Dokaibi. With a cheerful expression, Hyang turned to General Choi Hai-san and Yi Cheon. I have a very important task for you both. Upon hearing that, the two men stiffened in fear. Beads of sweat began to form on their temples. One of them cautiously asked, What is the task, Your Highness? But Hyang didn't answer right away. Hold on a moment. He walked over to his desk and picked up a rolled-up piece of paper. When he unfurled it, a firearm blueprint was revealed. Hyang smiled confidently. Yi Cheon's eyes widened at the sight of the design. The Crown Prince explained, This is the weapon I intend to create. The ministers who saw the blueprint were stunned, their mouths agape. Hyang repeated himself with conviction. With this, the future of warfare will change dramatically. Don't worry, he added, turning to Yi Cheon and General Choi. You two, let's work together to make this weapon a reality. The two generals remained silent, their eyes fixed on the design, lost in thought. Minister Zhang, intrigued, pointed to the diagram and asked, In this drawing, when you pull the ring at the bottom, it looks like the curved part above will move. But how does the fuse get lit? Instead of answering, Hyang asked in return, If it were you, how would you do it? Minister Zhang thought for a moment, then replied, If it were me, I'd tie the fuse right here where I'm pointing. Then place a small plate filled with gunpowder, here. When you pull this crescent-shaped piece, the fuse moves and ignites the powder on the plate. The fire travels into the barrel and, boom! An explosion occurs. Hearing the explanation, Hyang smiled with satisfaction. Minister Zhang, your analysis is excellent, he said enthusiastically. Now Yi Cheon began to understand the design as well. General Choi, who had been listening intently, finally spoke up. Come to think of it, this is a brilliant design. With this, we won't need an extra person to light the fuse, and the firing time will be significantly reduced. Hyang smiled, pleased that they finally understood how long it typically took to fire a single shot. He nodded and said, Exactly. However, Minister Zhang still looked puzzled. He asked, But, Your Highness, in this drawing there's no fuse or powder plate like we just discussed. There's only this small bump here. How are we supposed to load the gunpowder into it? The Crown Prince chuckled and explained, Let me clarify. According to Westerners, this part that looks like a chicken's head is called the hammer, and this here is something they call a cap. The small bump beneath the cap is called the nipple. Then, whispering for effect, Hyang explained what the term nipple meant in this context. Jung In-ji, shocked by the explanation, exclaimed, Scandalous! Unlike before, Yung Cho looked particularly interested in the explanation. Yung Cho spoke up, So we just move the hammer here and hit the cap? Hyang confirmed, Once it hits, boom, an explosion. Then General Choi raised a serious concern. But Your Highness, there's one major problem, our gunpowder supply. If the ingredients are mixed too coarsely, friction alone can trigger an explosion. And if it's not stored properly, the components can separate again. He paused for a moment, then added, Also, the main ingredient in our gunpowder is highly moisture absorbent. That's why our soldiers mix it with sand to reduce how much water it takes in. So even if we wanted to use the cap system you mentioned, I'm afraid it wouldn't work well, especially since our materials are so vulnerable to humidity. Hearing that, Crown Prince Hyang nodded. What General Choi said was absolutely true. These were major problems. But Hyang gave a faint smile and said, I have something that can solve that. He pulled out a small pouch filled with a fine, silvery powder. The ministers exchanged glances. None of them had any idea what it was. This is gunpowder I made myself, Hyang explained. In his heart, he thought, honestly, I still want to improve it further. But for now, this will do. I call it silver powder. Minister Zhang frowned, still confused. Silver powder? Does that mean it actually contains real silver? The Crown Prince let out a small laugh. He picked up a pinch of the powder, and, like a modern chef sprinkling salt with flair, dropped it dramatically. Smiling, he said, No, there's no silver in it. I used potassium nitrate, mercury, and alcohol. Jung In-ji, who had been wide-eyed the whole time, looked even more curious. Seeing his expression, Hyang handed him a hammer. Judging by your face, you're curious. Want to try it out? Jung In-ji hesitated, then took the hammer, grumbling inwardly, "Why do I have to do this useless task?" But as soon as he struck the paper with the hammer, "What the—" He jumped back in shock. A small explosion burst out, followed by a wisp of smoke. Hyang turned to General Choi and Minister Yi. "So, what do you think?" he asked casually. General Choi, who had been skeptical earlier, now lit up with excitement. "With this, we can actually make it work," he exclaimed. "Your Highness, how did you come up with something like this?" Hyang laughed heartily and, without thinking, gave the general a hug. "Ha ha, of course I did, because I'm a genius," he said jokingly. But just moments later, he turned serious again. "This is only a prototype. What do you think?" General Choi was still unsure. "I'm not certain yet, Your Highness," he said quietly. "May I try holding it?" Hyang nodded. General Choi picked up the weapon and slowly raised it. He carefully pointed it forward and asked, "Is this the correct position, Your Highness?" The ministers watching couldn't help but whisper in awe. "Wow, the general looks so cool, so stylish," they murmured. Hyang stifled a laugh. "These old men," he thought. Then Yi Cheon nodded and shared his opinion. "If we use this weapon, the multi-shot system won't be suitable anymore. A single-shot system would be much more effective." The Minister of Public Works raised his hand and asked, "But, Your Highness, I still don't fully understand the strategy. If it only fires one shot, wouldn't it be difficult to hit the target?" Minister Jang picked up the gun and studied its design closely. "It looks like this raised part here works as a sight. Also, the length of the barrel helps stabilize the shot, making it easier to hit the target." Hyang smiled, pleased that his staff's thinking was heading in the right direction. After a while, Minister Jang nodded in understanding, but then his expression turned curious. "There's something interesting about this design. This weapon doesn't seem to be made with standard casting methods, does it?" Jang Yong-sil asked. The Crown Prince gave a slight smile. "You're absolutely right. This weapon will be forged, not cast like the usual ones." He looked seriously at Minister Jang. "That's why I need you to inform the Military Logistics Department early, so they can begin preparations." This video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next part.